Rome, 1972. The heat sat low over the stone like it had weight. Tourists leaned along the edges of the Colosseum set, not sure what they were watching yet. A small film crew, a handful of onlookers, two men walking into an open space that looked older than both of them. One of them was directing the scene himself. Bruce Lee moved first, not fast, just certain. He adjusted a camera angle with his hand, stepped back, narrowed his eyes at the light. Then he turned, and the air shifted a little. Across from him stood Chuck Norris, broder, still, watching. No announcer, no referee. Just the scrape of shoes against stone. Someone near me whispered that Lee had already changed how America thought about fighting. Another said Norris was a champion, the kind who didn't bend easily. Nobody argued. They just kept staring. The cameras rolled. For a second, nothing happened, and somehow, that nothing felt louder than a shout. He didn't arrive like a movie star. No crowd pushing forward. No raised voice clearing space. Bruce Lee stepped onto the Roman set early, before the sun burned the dust pale. He wore simple training clothes, sleeves loose at the wrist. In one hand, a folded sheet of notes, in the other, nothing at all. The Colosseum stood behind him, ancient stone shaped by centuries. He studied it the way he studied people. Quietly, head slightly tilted, measuring distance without moving his feet. Someone from the crew asked about camera placement. He answered in short phrases, then walked the line himself. He crouched, looked through the lens, adjusted it by inches. When he stood again, he didn't smile. He just nodded once. He had been training since he was a boy. Years under Ip Man in Hong Kong. Later, small demonstrations in America that left audiences confused and leaning forward in their seats. He had opened schools, taught actors, challenged traditions that felt too rigid in his hands. None of that was spoken aloud here. It showed in the way people waited for him to finish thinking. A stunt coordinator suggested a wider frame for the fight sequence. Lee listened, didn't interrupt. Then he stepped into the center of the open stone and moved through the first exchange alone, slow, deliberate, shadowboxing, against an invisible opponent. His foot stopped exactly where it needed to. His fist paused an inch from where a face would be. No wasted motion. The coordinator lowered his clipboard without realizing it. There was a tightness to Lee that morning. Not nerves, something sharper, ownership. This wasn't just another scene. It was his film, his vision, his rhythm. He called for Chuck Norris to walk the space with him. Norris did. Broad shoulders, calm expression. They stood across from each other, measuring range without touching. Lee adjusted the distance by half a step, then another. He was building something only he could see fully. The crew kept quiet. At one point, Lee removed his jacket and folded it carefully, placing it on a chair off to the side. The gesture felt ordinary. Still, it changed the air. Conversations dropped. Someone near the camera cleared his throat and then stopped. Lee flexed his fingers once, rolled his neck, exhaled. He wasn't proving himself. He was arranging the moment, and everyone on that set, whether they understood it or not, had begun to move according to his timing. Chuck Norris didn't carry noise with him either. He stepped onto the stone with a steady pace, hands loose at his sides, eyes scanning the space the way a tournament fighter studies a ring. Rome was not his territory. Film sets weren't either. But fighting, structured, disciplined fighting, that was something he understood. By then, he had already built a name in American karate circuits. Multiple tournament wins. A reputation for control, the kind of competitor who didn't rush exchanges, who let the other man reveal himself first. No one announced that. It showed in how he stood. While Lee adjusted lighting and camera angles, Norris remained still, watching. Not impatient, just absorbing. When he bowed slightly before rehearsal, it wasn't for show. It was habit, rituals stitched into muscle memory. Lee walked toward him with a folded piece of choreography in mind. He spoke quietly, demonstrated a sequence, a high kick, a pause, a counter. Norris followed the outline, nodding once. Then he asked a small question: timing, angle, spacing. It wasn't defiance, it was calibration. For a brief moment, their conversation slowed the entire set. Crew members leaned in without meaning to. Two men discussing inches as if inches decided history. They ran the first exchange lightly, foot to stone. Cloth shifting in the heat, Norris blocked cleanly. Sharp. Efficient. Lee reset the sequence, this time increasing the tempo by a fraction. Norris adjusted again, breath steady, shoulders relaxed. There was no hostility in their eyes. But there was awareness. At one point, Norris threw a controlled kick that stopped just short of Lee's chest. The air between them tightened. Lee's gaze flickered, not anger, not surprise, just recognition. He stepped back half a stride and circled. Something had been confirmed. The crew pretended to rearrange equipment. No one wanted to interrupt whatever was forming in that open space. Norris wiped his brow once with the back of his wrist. Not fatigue. Heat. Roman summer didn't forgive anyone. He rolled his shoulders and looked at Lee again, this time not as a co-star. As a man testing range. Lee's lips curved slightly. Not a smile, more a quiet acceptance. Two systems. Two philosophies, neither explaining themselves. The sun rose higher. Shadows shortened. The Colosseum walls trapped the warmth, and with it, the tension. They were still rehearsing, but it no longer felt like practice. By midday, the stone had grown hot enough to sting through thin soles. The crew shifted equipment into tighter angles. Fewer words now. Movements economical. Someone checked the sound twice. Another adjusted a reflector that didn't really need adjusting. Lee stood alone for a moment near the center of the open ground. He bounced once on the balls of his feet, testing the surface. The air shimmered slightly above the stone. Rome was watching, even if it didn't know it. Norris approached without hurry. They faced each other again, this time without scripts in their hands. The choreography had been discussed, understood. But what mattered now wasn't written. Lee tilted his head and made a small gesture toward Norris's chest, almost playful. A challenge hidden inside rehearsal. Norris didn't react outwardly. His breathing remained slow. Inhale. Exhale, the kind that steadies the spine. Somewhere behind the camera, a crew member coughed and immediately went quiet. Lee stepped closer than before. Not touching. Just close enough to feel body heat. The space between their shoulders narrowed. That was when the silence thickened. It wasn't decorative. It pressed on the ears. Norris removed his outer shirt, folding it with deliberate care. His torso caught the sunlight, solid, defined. Lee watched without blinking. Then, almost casually, he reached down and loosened his own stance, rolling his neck once. No one clapped. No one called action yet. They began lightly. A probing kick from Lee, quick, almost teasing. Norris blocked and countered with controlled precision. The rhythm was still measured. Both men reading, adjusting. Then Lee increased speed without warning. Norris matched it. Feet scraped harder against stone. The echo changed. What had been rehearsal now carried edge. A brief exchange ended with both men stepping back at the same time, an unplanned reset. For a fraction of a second, Norris's heel slid slightly on dust. Not a fall. Not even close, just a visible imbalance. He corrected it instantly. But Lee had seen it. The crew had too. No one spoke. The cameras hadn't even officially started rolling for the main take yet. Still, something had shifted. That tiny slip small enough to deny hung in the air longer than it should have. Norris exhaled deeper this time. Lee didn't smile. He lowered his center of gravity, hands open, fingers alive. When the assistant finally called for the take, The word felt almost unnecessary. They were already there. The clapboard snapped once. That sharp sound scattered the last of the casual energy from the set. What followed wasn't loud. It was precise. Lee moved first, a fast side kick that stopped just short, testing reaction more than impact. Norris blocked clean, forearm tight, weight grounded. The exchange lasted seconds, but it carried more than choreography. Each strike landed where it was meant to land on film. Yet both men were reading what wasn't written. The rhythm shifted. Lee circled wider than before, changing angles. His feet barely lifted off the stone. Norris tracked impatiently, chin tucked, shoulders relaxed. No wasted emotion. Another burst, fists and kicks flowing faster now, cloth snapping in the dry Roman air. The sound of breath growing sharper. Then it happened. Norris stepped in to counter a mid-level strike, but Lee altered his timing half a beat. Their limbs met awkwardly for an instant. Norris's balance tilted not dramatically, not enough to fall, but enough to force a reset. His back foot slid a fraction on the dust again. A stumble? Not quite. But he had to step back. And he knew it. Lee didn't chase, he held position, watching. That pause was heavier than any blow. The crew forgot to breathe. One camera operator leaned forward too far and had to steady himself. No one called cut. No one dared. Norris inhaled deeper this time. You could see it in the rise of his chest. He adjusted his stance, eyes sharper now. Whatever politeness had been present earlier was gone. Not anger, just clarity. The tempo rose again. Kicks snapped higher. Counters came faster. Lee's movements looked less like separate techniques and more like one continuous thought. Norris responded with structure, solid blocks, decisive strikes, each one controlled but firm. The sun hit them directly now, light flashing off skin, sweat beginning to show along their shoulders. Another clash, a flurry too quick to name, and for the first time, Norris hesitated just a flicker before stepping in again. Lee saw it. He pressed forward, not wildly, but with intent. His footwork tightened, cutting off space. Norris yielded half a step, then another. Not defeat, pressure. Around them, Rome remained ancient and silent. The cameras captured everything, but the real weight sat in the reactions, the still crew, the tightened jaws, the way no one shifted their feet anymore. This wasn't about film precision now. It was about who controlled the space. And in that moment, the answer felt close. Something changed after that last exchange. Not in volume. In posture. Norris straightened slightly, rolling his shoulders back as if resetting more than just stance. Dust clung faintly to his heel where it had slipped earlier. He brushed it off with the side of his foot. Slow, deliberate. A small act, but it carried weight. Lee didn't rush him. He stood a few steps away, hands relaxed at chest height, fingers loose. His breathing had evened out again. Not shallow, not strained, controlled. The cameras kept rolling. For a moment, they circled without striking. The sound of their steps against stone echoed in uneven rhythm. Somewhere behind the lens, someone shifted their grip but quickly froze again. Then Norris attacked first. A sharp combination, direct, disciplined, forcing Lee to adjust backward. It wasn't wild, it was purposeful. A reminder that he was still there, still dangerous. Lee absorbed it. Redirected, his arms moved like hinges snapping into place. He gave ground once, twice, then stopped retreating. That pause stretched thin. Lee's eyes narrowed slightly. He stepped in close, closer than before, their shoulders nearly brushed. A short exchange at tight range, quick strikes, fast counters. The kind of distance where hesitation costs more. Norris exhaled sharply through his nose. Lee answered with speed. One clean sequence landed, not damaging, not brutal, but undeniable. Norris had to reset again, stepping back to regain structure. His chest rose deeper this time. Sweat traced along his jawline. No one on set whispered now. Even the assistant director, usually restless, stood still. Lee adjusted his stance again, lower. Not flashy, not theatrical, just grounded. When he moved next, it was decisive. The rhythm no longer felt shared. Norris defended with discipline, but he was reacting. And everyone watching could feel the difference. The ancient walls of the Colosseum didn't move. The sun didn't dim. Nothing dramatic happened. Yet the air itself felt rearranged. This was no longer two equals measuring each other. It was one man shaping the exchange. When the sequence reached its final beat and Norris dropped to the stone-controlled, scripted, respectful, the silence held for a second longer than expected. Lee stood over him, not celebrating, just breathing. And somehow, that quiet felt louder than anything that came before. Cut. The word landed softly. No cheers. No immediate applause. Just the sound of someone lowering a camera and the faint hum of wind moving through ancient stone corridors. Norris remained on the ground for a second longer than required. Not because he had to, just breathing. Then he pushed himself up with steady control. No frustration on his face. No performance either. Lee stepped back, giving him space. They looked at each other, not as characters now, but as men who had just measured something real. Norris nodded once. Small. Clean. Lee returned it the same way. Around them, the crew began moving again, but slower than before. A few exchanged glances. No one rushed to fill the quiet with praise. The energy had shifted into something harder to name. It wasn't about victory. It was about presence. Lee walked toward his folded jacket and picked it up. He didn't look triumphant. He looked focused, already replaying angles in his head, adjusting, refining. Even in the aftermath, he was directing. Norris spoke briefly with a crew member. Calm, composed. His breathing had settled. Whatever imbalance had surfaced earlier was gone now, absorbed back into discipline. The Roman sun dipped slightly lower, shadows stretching longer across the stone. Tourists beyond the controlled set area had begun to gather at a distance, sensing something worth watching without fully knowing why. Lee paused once before stepping away from the center. He looked back at the open space where they had stood. Just for a second. Not to admire it. To confirm it. Some who watched that day left impressed. Others left unsettled, unsure what exactly they had witnessed. It wasn't louder than other fight scenes. It wasn't bigger. But it felt different. And long after the cameras were packed away, that difference stayed in the air a little longer than it should have.